Hi, Bob Rasooli, Orange County, California. In today's session, I will discuss corrosion under insulation, or CUI, with a focus on what API 570 expects, the temperature ranges that drive susceptibility for different alloys, and, importantly, the inspection intervals and inspection scope you should apply in practice and on the exam. CUI is external corrosion that develops on insulated piping when water penetrates the jacketing and becomes trapped next to the metal surface. Because this environment is concealed, corrosion can progress for long periods without visible evidence. For that reason, API 570 treats CUI as a priority damage mechanism whenever operating conditions, climate, or insulation condition make it credible. Let me begin with the temperature ranges that matter for exam purposes. For carbon steel and low alloy steels, CUI is most active between 10 degrees Fahrenheit and 350 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 12 to 177 degrees Celsius. Within that window, condensation and wetting are frequent enough to sustain corrosion. Above roughly 350 degrees Fahrenheit, surfaces tend to remain dry in normal service. For austenitic stainless steels, the concern is not general corrosion but external chloride stress, corrosion, cracking under insulation. The typical range is 140 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 to 177 degrees Celsius. For duplex stainless steels, susceptibility to chloride SCC under insulation generally begins around 280 degrees Fahrenheit and extends to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 138 to 177 degrees Celsius. Those three ranges are essential to remember. Now, how does API 570 expect you to plan and time inspections for CUI? There are two pathways. First, you may use risk-based inspection. In that case, the interval or due date and the extent of inspection are set by the RBI assessment, and that assessment must be documented, updated after inspections or significant changes, and reviewed and revalidated within 10 years. Second, if RBI is not used, API 570 relies on fixed intervals by piping class along with specific guidance for CUI inspection scope. Under the fixed interval approach, the external visual inspection interval depends on piping class. For Class 1 piping, flammable, toxic, or high-pressure service, inspections are typically performed at intervals up to 5 years. For Class 2 piping, typical process unit piping, inspection is also up to 5 years. For Class 3 piping, lower consequence service, such as tank farm lines, inspection may extend to 10 years. Class 4 piping, utilities such as water, air, or steam, is generally optional and driven by reliability rather than safety. Remember that these are maximums. You should shorten the interval whenever experience, environment, or findings indicate elevated risk. In addition to intervals, API 570 lays out target levels for the extent of CUI examinations. After a walk-down visual inspection identifies damage or suspect locations, the extent of insulation removal or non-destructive examination is guided by class and by whether damage was observed. For Class 1, piping with damage or indications, examine about 75% of those damaged areas. For Class 1 piping in the susceptible range with no damage observed, still examine about 50% of the undamaged areas. For Class 2 and Class 3 piping, the percentages are smaller but still meaningful. For Class 4 piping, CUI inspections are optional. If CUI is identified during these examinations, the program must escalate. That means expanding the percentage of insulation removal or applying non-destructive techniques up to full circuit coverage if warranted. It can also mean shortening the inspection interval. Conversely, facilities with strong historical performance performance, and effective protective systems may adjust these targets over time, but any adjustments should be supported by data and documented in the inspection plan. In terms of techniques, the program begins with the visual walkdown and then applies insulation removal or appropriate NDE through insulation at suspect locations. Depending on access and configuration, techniques such as profile radiography, pulsed eddy current, or guided wave screening can be used to locate metal loss under insulation, followed by confirmation with direct visual and ultrasonic thickness measurement where needed. It is also important to focus effort at predictable CUI hotspots, low points where water collects, vertical to horizontal transitions, pipe supports, terminations near flanges and valves, and penetrations for steam tracing or electric heat tracing. After any insulation removal, the insulation and jacketing must be restored properly with water-shedding features and sealing to prevent re-wetting. For example, consider a crude distillation overhead system insulated for heat conservation operating within the carbon steel susceptibility window. If steam tracing leaks occur near that line, moisture can enter the jacketing and accumulate. A walk down may reveal staining or bulging in the jacket. Following API 570, you would schedule targeted insulation removal or through insulation NDE at those suspect spots in accordance with the class-based extent. Then expand coverage if CUI is found, and finally restore the jacketing and revise the interval for that circuit if the damage is significant. Another case is a stainless steel reflux line in a reformer unit operating at 250 degrees Fahrenheit, which lies in the chloride SCC range. A proper DMR would identify this as credible, and the inspection plan would require selective insulation removal at welds and stressed locations with penetrant testing or suitable ultrasonic methods. If cracking is identified, you would expand examinations, evaluate repairs, and shorten the interval as appropriate. Two final timing notes are useful. First, walkdowns should be aligned with startups, shutdowns, or significant upsets. During operation, heat can evaporate surface moisture and conceal deeper wetting. During outages, dampness is often more visible. Second, if RBI is used for CUI management, that assessment must include climate, insulation performance, operating temperatures, and historical findings. And it must be documented, updated, and revalidated within 10 years. The bottom line for the exam is straightforward. CUI is driven by temperature and moisture. For carbon steel, remember 10 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. For austenitic stainless steel, remember 140 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. For duplex stainless steel, remember 280 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. If RBI is used, it governs the due date and must be revalidated. If RBI is not used, follow class-based inspection intervals. 5 years for Class 1 and 2, 10 years for Class 3, and optional for Class 4. Apply the class-based extent of CUI examination. Around 75% of damaged areas and 50% of undamaged areas for Class 1, with smaller percentages for Class 2 and 3. Always restore insulation properly after access, and always adjust the plan based on evidence. That is what you should know about CUI in the API 570 exam.